Frost crusts the tin roof down in the hollow, and somewhere a screen door bangs in the wind. A woman climbs a rusted ladder in pitch dark, one rung at a time, a lantern hooked through her belt loop, its flame guttering with every gust. 61 years old. Knees that pop and complain with every step upward. Below her, a grain silo stands like a broken tooth against the winter sky, its concrete cracked top to bottom, its dome caved in on one whole side, weeds grown thick through gaps in the wall. She reaches the top rung, swings her legs over the rim, and drops down inside it, lantern light swallowed whole by the dark mouth of the structure. A dog barks somewhere down the hollow, then falls quiet. Lights flick on in a farmhouse window across the ridge, then go dark again, a curtain pulled back and let fall. For 3 nights running now, the neighbors have watched this same lantern climb and disappear into that ruined silo, and heard, faint on the wind, the ring of a hammer against tin. None of them have figured out what in the world Odessa Marchbanks is doing up there past midnight, alone, with a crowbar, a coil of wire, and a bucket of nails she guards like it holds something more than nails. If you've ever bet everything on something nobody else believed in, stick around for this one. Go ahead and hit subscribe if stories like this feel like home, and drop a comment telling me what town or county you're watching from tonight. Now let's rewind, back to where it began. Nicholas County, West Virginia, sits folded into ridges so steep the school bus takes the long way around to keep from tipping. The town of Craigsville has one blinking light, a feed store, and a Baptist church whose bell hasn't rung true since the Truman administration. Odessa Marchbanks had lived there her whole life, raised 3 children in a clapboard house at the end of Persimmon Ridge Road, and buried a husband, Dewey, in the cemetery behind that same church 11 winters back, on a day so cold the gravediggers used a torch on the ground. When Dewey died, the farm went quiet in a way Odessa had never known. The cattle got sold off truckload by truckload, until the barn stood empty and the fences went soft with rust. Odessa took work cleaning the county courthouse 3 mornings a week, and canned what she could from a garden that shrank a little more every summer as her hands grew slower. Her daughter, Fern, drove up from Beckley most weekends and always found the same scene. Her mother at the kitchen table past dark, sorting coupons, insisting she was doing just fine. What savings Odessa had left, a little over $4,000 from Dewey's railroad pension, she kept folded inside a coffee can behind the flour bin. She told Fern it was for a rainy day, for medicine or a roof leak, maybe her own funeral. So nobody expected her to spend every dollar of it in one afternoon, at a tax-delinquent property auction in the Fellowship Hall, bidding on 11 acres of scrub timber and a collapsed grain silo the county had been trying to unload for 6 years. The auctioneer, a wiry man named Gurney Ostrander running the sale off a folding table, had practically laughed when her hand went up. "Ms. Marchbanks," he said, loud enough for the whole room to turn and look, "you sure you don't want to sleep on that? That silo's been condemned longer than my youngest's been alive." She didn't answer him. She just raised her hand again when the bidding climbed, and signed the paper when it was hers, her signature steady even though her stomach wasn't. Word got around fast in a county that small. At the feed store, men leaned on the counter and shook their heads. At church, the Ladies' Aid Society brought a casserole the way you'd bring one to a house in mourning, murmuring that grief does strange things to a mind. Her own brother-in-law, Wardell Marchbanks, drove out one Sunday to tell her plainly she'd thrown good money after a dead man's dream, and no bank would ever count that wrecked land as collateral. What none of them knew, what Odessa hadn't told even Fern, was that the condemnation notice carried a hard clause in the fine print. If the structure wasn't restored to a usable, inspected state within one growing season, the land would revert entirely to the county under the blight ordinance, and every dollar she'd sunk into it would vanish, gone the way smoke goes. She had until the first week of September. It was already the 3rd week of May, and the calendar in her kitchen felt, for the first time in years, like something with teeth. She started with the roof, because a building can't heal from the inside while rain keeps finding its way in. She drove to the salvage yard in Somersville 3 times that first week, hauling sheet tin back in the bed of Dewey's old Ford, the tailgate wired shut with baling twine that had outlived 2 trucks already. She worked alone, mostly, climbing scaffolding built from 2 ladders lashed to a plank. Her hands, gone soft from years of courthouse mop buckets and grocery bags, split and calloused over again within days, like they were only remembering something they'd never really forgotten. Fern came up on a Saturday in June and found her mother 40 feet in the air, balanced on that scaffold, hammering tin into place with a mouth full of nails like she'd done it every summer of her life. "Mama, get down from there before you break your fool neck," Fern hollered up, hands shading her eyes against the sun. Odessa spat the nails into her open palm one by one, unhurried. "I'll get down when it's done," she said, and turned right back to the hammering, the sound ringing out across the hollow like a bell nobody asked to hear. Neighbors driving past on Persimmon Ridge Road slowed their trucks to watch, the way folks slow down for an accident they don't want to look away from. Clovis Riedenbacher, who farmed the land 2 ridges over, stopped one evening and stood at the fence line with his arms crossed tight over his chest. "That silo's been dead longer than my daddy," he called out. "Concrete's cracked clean through the foundation, Odessa. You're pouring good money into a hole in the ground." She thanked him kindly, same as she always did, and went right back inside without another word. By July, the shape of her plan had started to show itself, though nobody but Odessa seemed willing to really look at it. She wasn't just patching a roof anymore. She was rebuilding the whole interior structure from the footing up. New bracing bolted into the old concrete, a reinforced floor poured in sections, a second-hand grain auger she'd bought for scrap price and rewired herself, sitting up nights at the kitchen table with a library book and a wiring diagram. She'd worked construction summers as a girl, long before anybody thought that was a strange thing for a girl to do. Then, in the last week of July, disaster found her. 3 straight days of hard rain turned Persimmon Ridge Road to soup and sent a mudslide down to take out the culvert at the bottom of the hill. Her delivery of concrete mix, 6 weeks ordered and 6 weeks waited on, sat stranded in a truck stuck on the far side of the washout. The foundation crack she'd meant to seal before the next storm stayed wide open through 2 more nights of rain. Water pooled at the base of the silo overnight, and by morning, a section of the old footing had crumbled away into the mud. Odessa stood out in that mud and looked at the damage a long while, saying nothing. Fern, who'd driven up the moment she heard the road was out, found her mother sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at the ruined footing, not crying, just still in a way that scared Fern more than tears would have. "Mama," Fern said gently, crouching down beside her, "maybe this is a sign. Maybe you let it go now while there's still some money left over to walk away with before you lose it all." The wind picked up and carried the smell of wet earth between them. Odessa didn't answer right away. She sat with the silence a moment longer, looking at the crumbled footing like she was looking clean through it to something else entirely. Then she stood up slow, joints protesting, wiped both hands down the front of her apron and said, "Your daddy never once let a washed-out road stop him from getting the hay in before a storm. I don't intend to start being the one in this family who quits when the ground gets soft under her feet." Fern didn't argue further. She just handed her mother the trowel and stayed to help. She hand-mixed what concrete she had left in a wheelbarrow, patching the footing herself in a cold drizzle, and waited 2 more long weeks for the road crew to finally clear the culvert before the rest of her materials could get through at all. It put her 9 full days behind schedule. The county's growing season deadline did not move an inch to meet her. Now she had less than 6 weeks left, and a structure that still needed its interior finished, its auger tested and running, and its seal certified by a county inspector before that first week of September arrived, ready or not. She didn't slow down, not once. If anything, she worked longer hours by lantern light, humming old hymns under her breath the same way Dewey used to while he worked the combine at dusk. Wardell stopped driving out to argue with her. Clovis stopped slowing his truck at the fence line. The town, having quietly decided there was nothing left worth watching but a stubborn old woman losing a slow bet against a building, mostly turned its attention elsewhere, back to crops and weather, and the ordinary business of an August in the mountains. They were all still looking away in the last days of August, when the sky over Nicholas County turned the deep color of a fresh bruise, and the radio out of Summersville started using words nobody in that hollow liked hearing. Flash flood watch, remnants of a tropical system, expect significant rainfall through the weekend. Odessa heard it on the transistor radio in her kitchen and looked out the window at her silo, sealed and quiet on the ridge, and felt something in her chest tighten that had nothing to do with the deadline at all. The rain came in sideways for 2 straight days without any real let-up. Creeks that farmers had known their whole lives jumped their banks by dark on the second night, swallowing fence posts and mailboxes whole. Clovis Riedenbacher's low bottomland, where he'd just finished combining 40 acres of corn that very week, went under 3 feet of standing water before midnight. His grain truck stuck axle-deep in a field turned overnight to lake. Up and down the ridge, other farmers found the same trouble. Corn cut and sitting, no dry ground left anywhere to store it, and the grain elevators over in Summersville already flooded out and turning trucks away at the gate. Clovis drove through the rain to the only high ground he could think of that still had a roof standing over open storage space, and it was Odessa Marchbanks' silo. He came expecting to find it useless, half-built, the same joke it had been all summer. Instead, his headlights swept across a structure sealed tight top to bottom, its new tin roof shedding rain in clean sheets, its auger already humming steady under a portable generator, dry inside and fully ready, waiting on grain it had never once held. He sat in his idling truck a long moment before he climbed out into the storm. By 2 in the morning, 6 trucks idled in Odessa's yard with their headlights crossing in the rain, farmers unloading corn by lantern light straight into the one silo in the whole county that hadn't gone under, its new footing holding firm against ground turned to soup on every side of it. Wardell Marchbanks worked the auger controls himself, soaked clean through to the bone, saying not one word the entire night, because there was nothing left worth saying that the grain pouring through his own hands hadn't already said for him. By sunup, the news had traveled door to door faster than any phone tree in the county could have managed, and half of Nicholas County stood crowded into Odessa's yard in the mud, watching corn pour steadily into a building they had all spent the whole summer calling a hole to throw good money into. The county inspector, called out early that morning to assess general flood damage, climbed the new ladder on his own initiative, checked the reinforced bracing, the sealed footing, the working auger, and signed her official certification 3 full days ahead of the deadline, right there in the rain, using the hood of his own truck as a desk. The corn that came out of Odessa's silo that October sold at full market price, every bushel of it dry and sound, while grain left sitting out under tarps in other flooded bottomlands rotted before anyone could haul it to market. She used the storage fees farmers gladly paid her to pay back what remained of the coffee can, and quite a bit more besides. Clovis Riedenbacher came by that winter with a jar of his wife's sorghum molasses, and stood at her door a good while before he finally found the words to thank her properly. Wardell started calling it Odessa's Ark down at the feed store that winter, and the name stuck, half in jest at first, whole in respect by spring. Fern asked her once, on the porch that Thanksgiving with the ridge gone bare behind them, how her mother had known, really known, to build it the way she had. Odessa just looked out at the silo standing tall and tin-capped against the ridge, the same way she'd looked at it that first cold morning at the auction table. "I didn't know it'd flood," she said finally, turning the coffee cup slow in her hands. "I just knew a roof that keeps the rain out keeps whatever's under it safe, sooner or later. Your daddy taught me that much, and I never forgot it." Down in the valley below Persimmon Ridge, the old silo still stands today, patched and humming come every harvest. The one dry roof a whole hollow finally learned to trust, the hard way, in the middle of a storm nobody saw coming but her.